A very good evening to this August gathering. Thank you, sir, for sharing those exciting ideas. I did study Sanskrit in my school because I was fascinated how the Germans were experimenting with Sanskrit as a language, perfect language for computers. So that's how I got on to study Sanskrit, and I have a deep fascination. I have three concerns regarding your presentation and what you've told us as of now. Firstly, the approximation of Indian culture to Sanskrit alone, I find it slightly problematic because, as in your previous discourse you've just discussed, that Indian culture was wider than the Sanskrit because there were people speaking Pali, Prakrit. Yes. So we have the Ashokan pillars written in those languages as well.
Right. So this is where I made clear that the title is The Battle for Sanskrit, but it is actually Sanskriti. So I'm describing Sanskriti, which Sanskriti means culture, civilization.
But then how can you equate it? Because not everybody, like now what do you talk about people in the northeast? They are also part of India, and that is not the Indian culture alone. Like Sanskrit is not the culture there. So how are you?
No, wait a second. Are you saying their language is not Sanskrit, which is not an issue with me at all? Or are you saying that their culture is not Indian culture? But the second one, you have to become very clear.
I'm clear. I'm saying Indian culture is not equal to Sanskrit. Indian culture is a wider sphere in which Sanskrit forms a part.
Yeah, so it depends on what you define Sanskrit as. A language is not my definition of Sanskrit. Since there are certain structures in Sanskrit, certain architectures, certain ways of dance, certain ways of just way of life, which you will find in no matter what the language is, that kind of Sanskriti is being practiced. In Northeast it is being practiced. You know, you look at some ancient sites, you will see Hindu goddesses, deities there. It is a modern thing that they don't exist, but goddess is there in almost every part of India.
That is a part of pagan culture that we...
No, that pagan is a Christian term. Pagan means village bumpkin. It's an abusive term. It is. It's like nigger. So when the Christians took over the pre-Christian polytheistic cultures, they called them pagan as an insult. Means we are cosmopolitan, sophisticated. Aap log gawar hai, you are village bumpkins. So to you call anybody pagan, I don't like it. I don't even like the term tribal. Okay, I don't like that. There is no tribal. Tribals are those who didn't. They are jatis. We have jatis and varna. We don't have caste. And those who could not be put under the British scheme, who were outside the British scheme, they could not tabulate them, control them. Outskirts of the British scheme became tribals. So they are the uncivilized. So that's also an insulting word. So your vocabulary has to change. You know, you are probably, I can see, you are probably a product of modern social sciences. Are you studying social sciences?
No, I've studied law.
Okay.
Yes, I'm doing a PhD in international law.
International law, okay. Yes. So the categories you're using for pagan and stuff like that, you need to rethink the very basis in which you are doing your argument.
Okay. Anyways, getting on to the next issue that I have.
No, but let's agree to disagree. Let's see where we're agreeing to disagree, because it's nothing wrong with disagreeing. We should continue the conversation. So I don't want to impose any idea on you. I'd like to know. I'd like to state we disagree. I am saying there is a deep Indian architecture of civilization which is very common to all parts of India, and in fact parts of Southeast Asia. And even my opponents will agree with that. They will not disagree with it. They will just say it is abusive and oppressive, and I will say it is sacred. The character and benefit of it we disagree on. But the fact that there is a common architecture, they don't disagree with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for the comment. I just have one observation to make, however. That is also my second question as well. By relegating or by bringing Sanskrit to a sacred character, what are your expectations? A, is it to keep it a living language? Or B, is it to bring into practice all the Shastras and Smritis that have existed? Because then a very valid concern comes in the 21st century, where we have recognized human rights like right to equality for everyone, irrespective of caste, sex. So in that case, when Manusmriti comes in, there are people who are forbidden to go to temples, and women's rights are, disadvantaged.
I'm very happy you're here, because you belong on the other side. The removal of sacred is a very important agenda for my opponents on the grounds that it violates human rights, and to include, instead of the sacred lens to look at our text, looking at it as a human rights nightmare, human rights crisis, human rights exploitation as a lens has been brought in. So this started in the Indira Gandhi era with Irfan Habib and Romila Thapar kind of people, but they were not Sanskrit educated. So what happened is they brought in this human rights as the curse of Hinduism and as a curse of Vedas methodology of studying our civilization. However, it was easy to argue with them by saying, you don't know the text, you don't know Sanskrit, you are borrowing Western thought, and they were floored. So what Sheldon Pollock has done, he's the person I'm critiquing here, he's a brilliant Sanskrit guy. So he's a leftist Sanskrit guy. Okay, so he says, I'll fill that gap. So this is Romila Thapar's next generation, 2.0. These people that they're training are like the left wing of the past, except they're Sanskritized. They're Sanskritized left wing. So now they're more dangerous. But the ideology basically is that this sacredness, all you guys in the ashram, what you are all about, is all humbug, hocus pocus. And the texts that have been written that you are fond of are basically filled with human rights violations, because they'll deny this to the Shudras and this to the women and this to this guy, that guy, filled with human rights violations, and they were really spread for political motives and political oppression. So your thesis is actually my 500-page response. I'm not going to give you in 2 minutes, but I have a 500-page response to this allegation that these things are filled with human rights violations. I don't buy that at all.
I think you didn't get it clearly. I said Shastras and Smritis. Now, they are two different things. So, some of the Smritis are a later part. Okay, so they do contain some things. Like now also in Indian temples, Dalits are not allowed to get inside. You cannot deny that. It happens. So,
Wait.
No, it's not stopped. I'm not saying all temples. In some temples, please.
No.
Yes.
Listen to me.
Yes.
Listen to me. I want you to read chapter 4, which is that is about this thing. Chapter 4 is basically saying, it is called Sanskrit considered a source of oppression. That is what you're talking about.
No, I don't think
Sanskrit and its texts. Manusmriti is a text. Shastras are a text.
Yes.
Smritis are a text.
So do we limit to some text, or do you accept Manusmriti also as a potential
No, but wait a second. Sanskrit and its text considered a source of oppression, page 135, it's a 40-page chapter, and it details these arguments from the strongest authorities, my opponents, the strongest opponents, and then my response. So I would request you to read these 40 pages. Why they consider Sanskrit texts, Shastras, Smritis, and all these kind of things to be a source of social abuse. You should understand their argument, and then my response. And then I think we'll be better equipped. I'm coming back every 3 months here, and I'd like you to come back after you've read this. Then we can have a debate, because it's too many things you are saying which are false assumptions. I would have to stop you every few words.
No, I'm not talking about false assumptions. There are social realities. One incident happened in Bombay as well.
Okay, I don't want to get into an incident that happened in Bombay.
Yes.
Because that is not what this book is about.
Okay, I know. So that's what I'm asking you to differentiate whether this book is about entirety of any text written in Sanskrit, or is it from some specific text you want to get a status of sacred. Say Vedas are fine if you want to get them the status of sacred, or you want everything to get the status of sacred.
It is not either or. It is not either or. I am doing, what a Purv Paksh is. What is Purv Paksh?
Due diligence.
No, it is a study of the other. Okay, so I am responding to the other. So what they are saying, I'm responding to that.
Okay.
What they are not saying, I'm not responding to that. Okay, they are not saying about everything or not everything is sacred or every text or this or that. They have a certain position on the sacredness issue. I'm responding just to that.
Okay.
So to question me, you must know what is their position, why I am critiquing it, and what is my Uttar Paksh. Then you can participate in the debate.
Okay, and last observation that I have to make, I think you are aware of the International Covenant of Economic, Social, Cultural Rights, 1966, which recognizes right to preserve language and culture. So I do understand that we all have a right to preserve Sanskrit and we all have to play a role in it. So don't you think because Article 2 of the Covenant recognizes state obligation?
Yeah, my case has nothing to do with any international law, any treaty, any of these things. It has nothing to do with that. Let's say none of those even existed. I, as a person who is an insider to a tradition, have a right to voice and give a response to those who are outsiders who are oppressing it. Okay. Yeah. And my plea to you is, as a young, creative, bright mind that you are, don't become an automaton, mechanical. This law says, Article 2 says this, as if you're a prisoner of Article 2. To heck with Article 2. We can argue from reasonableness. Whether it's in law or not, we can argue from reasonableness. We can change the laws if we think so. So even if there were no law to protect languages, the point is, and all these laws got biases. All these, the human rights, the law on genocide, the law on genocide, which was drafted by the United Nations. The first draft had a clause which also included cultural genocide. Demolishing a culture would be an act of genocide and criminal. It was removed by the Western countries, and that is not part of the human rights law of genocide, because conversion would be considered an act of genocide under that. So these laws are okay.
Forceful conversion is still considered that.
If you want, no, I'm saying if you want to talk law and all, we can have a whole session on that. But the reason I said this is, you're taking some sacrosanct law of the 1980s as if that's the ultimate thing. I don't care about that.
No, I was just understanding your perspective on whether you think the state should also play its role in advancing Sanskrit. That was where I was coming. I think you just misread me somewhere in the middle and went haywire.
No. What I'm saying is.
So how do you keep the language alive?
No, you could state your question just by saying, should the state have a role? Period. That's your question. Why do you want to bring some law? No law required. Your question is a good question. Should the state play a role in protection of Sanskrit? Now let me tell you, in France, which is one of the most liberal countries, when they give a media license, there is a minimum French content required in order to have a media license in France. And in China, the protection of Mandarin is a national thing. English is a second language, not the mother tongue. Even now they want everybody to be English speaking as a second language.
So is the case in Russia and Germany.
So Russia, Germany, Japan. So we are not the only ones that would like to do that. So is it in Iran. Persian language is the mother tongue. So is it in Arabia. We have this English obsession because we are still colonized. We still want to become white. Okay. So one of my unpublished books is How the Indians Become White. Okay. There's a book I read which inspired me, How the Irish Became White. And then there's a may I complete? And then a book called How the Jews Became White Folks. So I started reading. White is not color of skin, it is privilege. It is certain lifestyle. So the Irish were not considered white for membership in these labor unions. Because the labor unions were all white labor unions to keep the blacks out. And the Irish, because they were ruled by England, Ireland was a colony of the British. So when these Irish guys would come to America, the Englishmen would not want him in the union, in the labor union, because he's from a colony. So the Irish were excluded from labor unions, hence they were not classified as white people for legal purposes. And there was a big riot and war and people killed in Philadelphia. All this happened in the 1800s, and then a settlement was reached that from now on we will classify Irish as white people. So this is how the Irish became white. They were not considered white. I give this book to a lot of my Irish friends, and first they get very angry because they think that they are, big shots in the US now. I tell them, you were not white until 150 years ago. And then there's a book called How the Jews Became White, folks. Until the early 1900s, Karen Brotkin wrote the book, the anthropologist in UCLA. Until the early 1900s, Jews were classified as people of color for immigration purposes. So now, how they are becoming white, they're becoming white like that. Now Hispanics are fighting as to whether we want to be white or not white, because there are two kinds of people. And it has to do with language. The preservation of Spanish and the lobby that it should be a second language on par with English is for the Hispanic identity. That is what it is. And those who don't want to be classified as a separate ethnicity becoming white, and you just see them, they're just like white people. It's not about skin color. So Indians becoming white is more complex than all of these, because not only Indians become white, not only the skin color kind of business, but there is an intellectual whiteness. Indians want to become like the liberal white. They're reading a certain kind of very lofty kind of writer that nobody has heard about, and because he can pronounce some very complicated word, he's become a little more white than the other person. And his single malt is 18 years, and your single malt is only 15 years, and so he's a little bit more white, and he knows some aesthetics. It's all about white aesthetics in language, and you see it in the Jaipur Literary Festival. That is how you're becoming white. Okay. So what I'm trying to tell you is that preservation of native culture, spiritual traditions, languages, dance, drama, ethnicity, all of this way of life is our right. It is not something some treaty has to give us, and we have to argue based on Article 2 of that treaty whether we're allowed to do this. I don't buy that. I have a right to assert my identity as my right, and all I'm doing is arguing. They can reject it. I'm not imposing on anybody. All I'm doing here, I'm not using any state machinery. I'm saying I want to create a group, a home team of intellectual scholars who are traditional intellectual scholars who can go to international forums and debate and give answers, talk right back to the outsiders. That's all I'm trying to do. And so I don't want to be dragged into anything more than that.
Okay, I get your point.
I understand.
And also, yes, I do appreciate that we have to obviously preserve our language, our culture. That's how I started also my note. Also, in support of what you said, the white, how we all are turning white. One thing which I've noticed now is that if anyone applies for a job application, if you have any degree from abroad, be it a diploma also, you get an edge even if you're from the best college in India.
Yes.
Somewhere that happens. And also there is a kind of post-colonialism which is happening now, wherein these big brands like say Marks and Spencer, Benetton, they come and open their factory outlets here with minimum rights, like they do not give those same wages and living conditions to workers, in the instance wherein buildings have collapsed in Bangladesh. Like they exploit our workers to sell those products back to us at an exorbitant rate. So something which happened during the 1600s.
What is your name?
Shivika,
I'm very happy that you're here, and you're certainly a very bright person in human rights kind of a law, I can tell, and that's an important thing. I think what my suggestion to you is read this, and maybe it'll give you some references to an Indian idea of human rights. An Indian idea. See, the idea of human rights is a Western idea. It is not an Indian idea.
Now we're bringing the Oriental or the Indian idea.
Because we have nature has rights. The environmentalist movement is not giving nature its rights. It's just saying it is a raw material, and the reason I want to preserve is I may run out of
I'll tell you a very interesting incident. There's a tree in the US which has right to land. It was a case fought by environmental lawyers, and there is a 5-mile patch, not a 5-meter patch that the tree has around it. It owns it now because it was being cut down. So the environmental lawyers won that case. So something in that context we are trying to work here as well. I really appreciate it.
It is not a US innovation.
Yes.
The right of a tree is not a US innovation.
It is not.
Nature's right is built into our structure.
Very true.
Nature is sacred, has rights.
Yes.
Okay. Over there, God made the world as property for man. You know that. Even woman was property for man for quite a long time. Only recently it got changed. And it was not clear that whether blacks have a soul. It was a huge argument in the church, do they have soul or not? Animals don't. And there was even a debate on whether women have a soul in the church. There was a debate hundreds of years ago. We never had these problems. Even little chinti has Atma. Okay? And this nature is sacred. It is not because nature is my property, I must protect it, and because my property will lose value. It's not that. Whereas environmental movement is don't spoil the water because the fishing industry will be hurt. Okay, and don't deplete the energy because the energy price will go up. It is an economic self-interest of human beings for which nature has to be preserved. We have a different view. We say that nature has its own rights.
Right.
It is nature's rights, it's not our right to own nature. Different view.
I just make a last comment and make a link because we can have a lengthy discussion on
Yes,
this.
we should have one.
Yes. Supporting your natural rights theory, wherein we derive rights from nature and everything derives rights from nature, from the state of being. When the invaders came, the Spanish and the English invaders came, they were in a fix to deal with people like us because the Bible did not mention our lands. So they were in a fix that time because everything was doctrinated in Bible. And so they had to look back to natural thinkers like Grotius, Hugo, to understand how to deal with people, and to deal with indigenous people, though they still made a mess out of it. But yes, we have to ultimately look at nature. That's what I feel. And so I have a submission to make that in Sanskrit also, in Shastras wherein the nature is not being respected, I feel that portion need not be sacred.
No. We have every right to amend, modify, debate, reinterpret.
That was my only concern throughout the whole discussion.
No, sacred doesn't mean that we don't reinterpret, that we don't challenge. We have had many revolutions. Sacred is not history. You have to read a book of mine called Being Different, where I describe the spirit. The dharma is not religion, and what you are arguing, your view of sacred is as per religion, and religion is historically determined, fixed.
Yes.
The God stopped sending prophets, and he has got a do not disturb sign. He is not accessible, and so what was written historically is all we know. In our case, new spiritual masters keep coming, and you are Satchitanand. You have the same potential as the highest being in the cosmos. You can achieve that. Every human being has that. So we are not history centric. Therefore, the sacredness is not sort of fixed and that cannot be challenged and questioned and superseded. We have to do that. So sacredness is not that this thing is sort of that there is a blasphemy law. It's nothing like that. Okay. So I'm glad that you are a fiery person and you'll be a good leader, including in the sacred dimension. Just do not think of religion. Think of the dharma as a
I wanted to clarify what was your interpretation. Now I got it now at the end. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. See, I like young people to come and challenge. It's a lot of fun. But one point you mentioned, when the Spaniards and the Portuguese, these guys discovered the native lands, I'll tell you, they all wanted to own the land, so they wanted to claim, but they have an obsession to look like they're moral. They want to kill, but there have to be a moral reason. So they had to figure out what to do with these Native Americans, natives. So it was decided, therefore a huge debate started on do they have souls or not, do they count. And then the church issued an edict called the Doctrine of Christian Discovery, which means discovery happens when a Christian discovers it. This is why America was discovered in 1492 by Columbus, as though the natives who lived there for 20,000 years never discovered it. This is amazing. You see, this is called just search, Doctrine of Christian Discovery. You will see that there was these doctrine issued by the Pope, and these doctrines were called bull. They are like fatwas. And I don't know why bull, maybe it was bullshit or something. Maybe they call that. But this is called a papal bull, which means Pope has issued this bull, and it has authority, final authority, saying that when somebody who is a Christian discovers a land and declares that he has discovered it in the name of Jesus Christ and that, it becomes the property of the particular empire. Because whether it's Spanish, Portugal, they ultimately report it to the Vatican. So this is the history of how they treated the natives.
Hi, I'm Abhishek.
In this book, chapter 2 gives you that. What is different about American history from European history? The American approach to India is different than the European approach to India, because America has absorbed and assimilated the genocide of Native Americans and the slavery of blacks, and that hasn't gone out of the American psyche. And so Europeans have the colonization of other people in foreign lands, and America is genocide and slavery in their own land as foreign occupants who took over on that basis. So it's different historical experience in the basement of the people.